very warm welcome to everybody who's joined us for the launch of our book, Green Manufacturing, What This Involves and How to Achieve Success. Available, I ought to say, on Amazon now. Very good price for this paperback version at $12.99. And many thanks to our publishers, Bite Sized Books, who've done such a fantastic job with this edition. And I think Steve McCabe, my co-editor, Dr. McCabe, who's here online, and I are both thrilled with it, and we're very grateful to all of our contributors. And there's a good number here today. Alex, uh, would you mind muting everybody who's joined us today, so that if you're not speaking, if you could be on mute, I think that would be really helpful. So before I introduce our very distinguished and experienced panelists today, I'd like to say, what an exciting week it's been with COP, and no doubt there'll be much feedback from our panelists and contributors on COP26 and what we've seen coming out of that so far. I was reading a comment from Fatih Birol of the International Energy Agency saying that we looked like we were on track now to keep emissions to below 2 degrees C by 2050. At 1.8, he said if we actually kept to all the agreements that have been signed, whether on deforestation, methane, coal pledges that have been made, and of course the financial commitments that have also been made. So, if that's right, it's very encouraging, but I'm really looking forward to setting the scene and for us today to be focused on green manufacturing, which is, after all, the title of the book, and what all of our contributors have really focused on different aspects of it. So I'm going to start with Brigitte Amoruso. Hopefully you will see her biog in the chat now. So I won't spend too long in introducing you, Brigitte, except say how thrilled we are that you're here today, and you're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of, and probably some challenges too, of green manufacturing. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be at this launch. And so what are the benefits of green manufacturing? Well, the manufacturing industry is responsible for 13% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions, and is currently the third highest emitting sector in the UK. So this means that it has a vital role to play in the move to a net zero carbon economy just by decarbonizing itself. But obviously the role is a dual one. It's not just that. And as a formidable engine of the economy, accounting for 191 billion of output, providing 2.7 million jobs, with wages on average 13% higher than the rest of the economy, and making 16% of total business investment in the UK, it is a formidable engine of the economy. So globally, the UK is amongst the top 10 largest manufacturers in the world, with manufactured goods amounting to 56% of the UK total exports. So in fact, it is a vital part of the solution to the biggest challenge that humanity is facing. And the transition to net zero requires the radical transformation of our economy and all the systems that underpin it. So new technologies, products, and services will be needed to make this work. And industry has a crucial role in designing, manufacturing these in new ways that make them more efficient, more durable, repairable, and recyclable, enabling a more circular, sustainable economy. So the transition to the green economy is regarded as the biggest opportunity for the manufacturing sector in decades. Of course, there are challenges, such as improving manufacturing processes and buildings, ensuring that the sourcing of raw materials, transport and logistics, and the product used to end life are sustainable. The fast adoption of industrial digital technologies as well will be vital to enable the smart functionality needed to optimize the processes, products, and services. These technologies are one of the big enablers of green manufacturing, and the UK has been slow in adopting them compared to other countries, and there is a big dependency on 5G being available. However, in our surveys at Make UK, we have observed a definite progress in adoption just in the last 12 months, with over half of manufacturers well on their way to capturing the potential of these technologies. The major benefit of having invested in IGTs and particularly robotics, cobotics, automation, and the industrial Internet of Things is an improvement of productivity, no surprise, in over half of the cases, and a reduction in resources in core manufacturing areas such as manufacturing process, product design and development, and operations infrastructure. But there is also better product quality, greater flexibility, innovation, and better customer engagement and service in almost 40% of cases. And about a third of businesses observed a reduction in carbon emissions as well as improved energy, raw material, and waste efficiencies. And we mustn't forget the wider picture. This is truly the big moment that our British industry could seize to demonstrate its creativity and strength. Green manufacturing will lead to the development of entirely new supply chains: wind power, hydrogen for heating and transport, advanced small modular nuclear reactors, or carbon capture. These will create new revenues for many sectors, attract talent, and create many new jobs. Globally, there will be an impetus, particularly for vans, HEVs, buses, fashion, cement and concrete, consumer goods, cooling, pharma, and medtech. These sectors have been announced at the Glasgow breakthroughs at the COP26, if you want to refer to that. And so it's really, the future is really bright for British green manufacturing, and we can look forward to rides on the wave.
Thanks so much for those opening words, Brigitte. Really helpful, and plenty to look forward to there, but also some challenges. And I think you were highlighting the sort of scale of some of the challenges in terms of the transition. And I know that this is something our next speaker, Vicky Price, the economist, Biog, hopefully in the chat now, will be focusing on in some of your introductory words, Vicky, looking at the economic impacts of green manufacturing and perhaps some of the financial commitments coming out of COP this week.
Indeed. I just muted myself briefly because there is a big trolley load of trolleys that are going past me. I'm in Paddington, I'm afraid. And although I found a nice quiet place, it doesn't seem to be quiet continuously. So I apologize. I'm going to speak a little bit more loudly, but then I'll mute myself as quickly as possible. But thank you for that introduction. And also, what Brigitte said about where we may be moving to from here. I just wanted to bring us back a little bit because, of course, we all talk about green manufacturing. Just as Brigitte was actually suggesting, manufacturing is very important. And of course, we can decarbonize quite easily by just deindustrialize, but just not manufacturing. And if you look at the way in which the big polluters, the big countries that pollute, are polluting, is mainly, of course, we have transport issues and the buildings, but the ones that really produce a lot of fuel and manufacture tend to also obviously pollute quite a lot. There's somebody else who's just unmuted themselves, so you can hear me all right. Then that's great. So what we absolutely need to do is look at the way in which any transition might take place, and might take place without necessarily completely ruining the manufacturing sector, which is so important for the economy, productivity, exports, and so on. And also, of course, creates loads and loads of service jobs. Well, where are we now? I mean, we have had the announcement so far on COP26. You found quite a lot of large firms now saying that they want to decarbonize and are themselves are committed to doing various things. There's going to be a lot of regulation coming up in terms, mainly, not so much, like in the car industry, where obviously emissions will have to be reduced gradually and the regulations have come in force. But also the sort of commitment on the finance side, which is now saying that we are going to be putting a lot more money to green, however we define it. And I think that's what my little chapter in the book focused on. are we really talking about increasing the number of jobs that, as a result of investing more in this area, um, as an additional number of jobs? Or are we talking about just converting the whole economy to green? And the way that I understand green manufacturing is very much doing things differently. Of course, we can become green overnight, but just switching, if we can, all our energy use to renewable electricity that comes in through, in terms of any company, comes in through the pipes, if you like. But of course, we're not quite there yet because quite a lot of electricity is still using old fossil fuels. But there is an awful lot more, of course, that can be done to change the way we move. And yes, of course, we're going to be investing in innovation, and there will be researchers working on this, and there'll be money moving into that area. But the question for me is, how do we do it in such a way that it is indeed additional? Because this view that we're going to have 450,000 new jobs if we are following this government's, the UK government's plans, the number has been around for decades. I remember working for the government back in the 2000s, and I was asked to approve a statement that was about to go out saying there would be 450,000 jobs created after Nick Stearns, who was under whom I worked, his climate change review. We actually followed, the spending that was necessary to move us into a more green economy. A lot of that, of course, on manufacturing and new innovation. And I said, we can't actually get that figure because we don't know if those jobs will be additional. We don't actually know whether, we're going to have this type of innovation and technology that we know about now, whether it's going to be something completely different, whether it's going to change entirely the way in which we work. So I can't really put a figure. Well, they came out and said 450,000 jobs are going to be created. It's exactly the same number that that Boris Johnson announced just before COP. 26 on the back of the UK numbers. So we have to be a little bit cautious, but we're also going to be seriously concerned about the transition costs for business. And I mentioned the financing side. It's really good news that there is so much money supposedly which is going to be going into new technology and green. But of course, is it additional again, or is it just moving from other areas? But if it is deployed the right way, and if the incentives are there and are properly followed, and if there is a lot of risk sharing, because obviously, in order to get the right returns, given this, the fact that we just don't know what the technology will be in the future, we do need the finance sector, businesses, and governments to work together and share some of those risks to get the right returns for our pension funds, for example, or for anyone else. Then there has to be this agreement in terms of taking risks, sharing those risks, and ensuring that in the process of transition, the energy intensive industries are not completely crucified. And in my view, that is really important. Of course, we can do loads in terms of AI to improve the monitoring and also the reporting of what individual businesses do. And many of them have done amazing things down that route. But of course, firms are going to have to now follow quite a lot of new standards, tighter standards. We heard about that in COP26 just yesterday in terms of reporting their contribution to climate change, if you like, and what they're doing on a year-by-year basis to reduce that. It is going to be a tough period. And during that tough period, some hand-holding will be absolutely required. So obviously, to finish, when you look at the budget, when you look at spending review, the announcements that were made just a few, last week or whenever it was, what we didn't get is any serious support for manufacturing in terms of energy costs, which of course have gone up very significantly. I'm not suggesting that one should just bail out the entire sort of energy intensive manufacturing sector that we have here, but that more thought will obviously need to be given if we are serious about converting manufacturing to green, but not destroying what we've got there already. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that, Vicky. And I think a round of applause really is required for you inputting from Paddington live with trains and all the activity going on behind you. So thanks so much for that, Vicky. And you talked about some of the challenges for our industrialists and the fact that there was no specific support for manufacturers in the budget. And I'm now going to move to two of our manufacturing contributors who tackle these challenges day in, day out. And first of all, I'd like to come to Julian Morgan MD of KPM Marine, a very well known to us all in Birmingham, the center of the marine production industry, I hear, too. You're muted, Jules. Do you mind unmuting yourself?
Yes, the epicenter of the marine world, Birmingham. So, right, could we put up my... Okay, here we go. What I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of take you through a journey of how we got into green manufacturing. 28 years ago, I worked for a computer company that was named after a fruit. And walking through their factory, I realized I was part of the environmental problem. And just the scale and the resource and the waste. And so I, not soon after, set up my own business in Birmingham as a startup. And what we do is we manufacture air system pumping systems, safety seating systems for the marine industry. And one of our big markets is wind farm service vessels. Now, you can see on the screen a typical wind farm service vessel. That's about 24 meters, carries between 12 and 24 technicians, but it burns 3,000 liters a day of diesel. It also carries 70,000 liters of diesel to refuel the wind turbines. And most people are quite surprised that you need diesel for wind turbines, offshore wind turbines, but you do. And they have to be refueled every week or so. Can you go to the next slide, Bill? Now, when we started off, we realized that having wind farm service vessels that were burning 3,000 liters a day to deliver 12 technicians 24/7 wasn't particularly economic. And so what we did, we set about trying to improve the efficiency of these vessels and increase their green credentials. And what we have here is we have a series of product lifecycle curves. Now, I put this up into a conference in Aberdeen in 2013. It's proven to be very accurate. But one of the things that we knew about was that if we tried to jump the product life cycle, we were doomed to fail. And these boats are 2 to 3 million pounds. And it's a big mistake to make on a vessel. It doesn't quite work. So we were very cautious about technical overreach, cause and effect, integration into current systems, implementation scalability, and technology readiness levels. Now, back in 2013, we were still having to run with diesel. We have now started to bring out hybrid vessels. Hybrid works for us. It's a good combination. We're looking at hydrogen very seriously, and we've just finished trials on a number of wind farm vessels with something called HVO, which in all intents and purposes is vegetable oil, but it is actually quite efficient. The third generation 3, we think is going to be zero maintenance wind turbines. That's the natural progression. So you don't have to send the boats out at all. So I must add that in the last 10 years, it's been the fastest rate of development and technical obsolescence since World War II in the marine industry. It really has moved very, very quickly. But what we're doing with the old boats is we are now going to upcycle them into the hybrid environment. So we are cutting down our remanufacture and reusing what we have. But all of this happened because as an industry, we all got together and thought about it and debated it very, very hard. Yeah. That's not always the case in other industries, which are probably more competitive. But we are controlled by the International Maritime Organization. So we have a legislative body that is fairly strict. And I think that helped. If you go to the next slide, please, Phil. Right. Now, how do we green manufacture? We have a system on our CAD computer system, and I can determine by component how much carbon, energy is used, air, and water. Yeah, so I can determine from material, manufacturing, transportation, and end of life how much it's going to cost the environment. So if you look at the chart on the left-hand side, I run this component that you can see on the right-hand side, which is swing arm, which belongs to the seat behind here. And if I run it in composite, you can see the black line. Yeah. If I run it in aluminium, you get a positive environmental impact. On energy, it's much more efficient. Yeah. On water, it's much more efficient again. On air acidification, it's not so good. But I point out the ratio that I did this calculation on was a 1-to-1. Now, aluminium as a material, and I'm not representing the aluminium industry, but 75% of all aluminium that's ever been manufactured in man's lifetime is still in existence. It's continually recyclable. And when you convert aluminium, it only requires 5% of the original energy that I'm showing on these charts to reconstitute it. Yeah. And because of that, its end of life value remains high. Plastic has no end of life value, as we've seen, because we're dumping into the third world and developing countries, which is appalling. And so we look at the whole environmental impact of the every component in the complete product. So we work on weight reduction, which saves fuel. On one of the vessels that we did, we saved 100,000 pounds in fuel a year. So it's an economic benefit. We eliminate all volatile organic chemicals and plastics because the day will come that manufacturers will have to recycle their own product. Recyclability, we work on a 95% recyclable capability. End of life value, you have to get as much money back as you possibly can. It's got to be repairable. And big one is localization. There is no point in having extended lifetimes for something that can be made locally. And basically, we had to change our business model. You've got to work at it. You've got to think differently. But that's how we.
Thank you.
That's how we do it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thanks, Charles. Very good of you. Getting a little bit of feedback there, but that's really fantastic insight into a real practical, hands-on example on the ground, and so much thought's gone into that, Jules. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to get
There's just a point that we sometimes we throw away the old and the obvious in favour of the new, and I call it fidget spinners and loom bands. Sometimes I want to get into manufacturing with pen because I think I can't get any pen. But I think we need to look backwards as well as forwards and find new production processes, as Peter making cable tell you, for using environmental material but in a new way.
Yeah,
I think that's where we need to go.
Thanks, Jules. Thanks so much. All right, I'd like to move on to Christopher Nieper. Time is unfortunately ticking away and rather against us at the moment. So, Christopher, can't see you, but I know you're there. So if you'd like to start your presentation, really look forward to hearing about the very practical things you've been doing to move to a green manufacturing process at David Nieper. Thank you.
Yes, I think, Phil, do you have a short video you can show? My name is Christopher Nieper, and our family business has been here in Derbyshire for 60 years. We make fashion and we employ 300 staff. But do you know, fashion is one of the world's worst polluters. It emits 1.2 billion tonnes of CO2 each year. But it doesn't have to be that way. And we are living proof that fashion can be sustainable. All of our 5 factories have solar power, and we're very careful with our energy because cutting waste makes commercial sense and it's sustainable. British companies really don't need to source so much offshore, where pollution is out of sight and out of mind. I don't think British consumers should put up with this, and I don't think they would if they had a choice. So why don't we give them a choice? I suggest clothes should have a label, an at-a-glance carbon checker label, which rates the company which did most of the work. You see, consumers want information, and consumers are responsible when given the choice. Consumer choice is a powerful way of cleaning up the world's most polluting industries. Labels cost the taxpayer nothing, but every company needs to join in. So my challenge to our government is to embrace this idea and legislate to give consumers a choice and our planet a chance.
Well, thank you very much. That gives you a wonderful insight into our factory and what we're doing here. You may be aware that most of fashion has gone offshore in the last 20, 30 years. And so I would like to come back to Vicky Price, who, by the way, has been here a few years ago. Thank you, Vicky, for your great presentation, because I think there is an opportunity to create new jobs and additional jobs because of the climate movement that we see in front of us. And this carbon checker label, by the way, would also have a job creating effect. Now, if you look at the UK fashion industry, we think only 3% of all the garments that we're wearing, all the clothes that we wear today, are made here in the UK. And although there are 115,000 people employed in fashion and textiles, only 26,000 are employed in manufacturing clothes. So if this carbon checker label was to create a swing of 3% more from offshore to onshore, that in itself creates 26,000 new incremental additional jobs. So I think we can use the environment, the climate, this agenda now for job creation. And those jobs, by the way, will be most likely created in the Midlands and North, in the levelling up areas, in the forgotten communities, and that's exactly where the government needs it. So I can only see a win-win from this. And I don't think we need to worry so much about energy. I think we really can create that ourselves. We generate our energy off the rims, we recycle, we have heat recovery, we have heat source pumps, etc. All of that can be done. So I do see new jobs being created without any additional taxes with simple schemes like the one I've shown you. I'm trying to keep for 4 minutes, and I hope that's a good introduction. Thank you, Brie.
Thank you very much, Christopher. That was absolutely superb and very clear message. So appreciated. And I'm going to move now to Jack Dromey, MP for Birmingham Erdington. And absolutely thrilled you've made it, Jack. I know you've got a very busy day at the moment. And as vice chair of the all-party group on manufacturing, I know that in our recent report, this is one of the recommendations that we focused on, eco-labelling. And I know that you're also vice chair of the environment group too, but very much look forward to any thoughts, Jack, on that, and obviously also out of COP26. Thanks, Jack.
On mute. Thank you very much, Beverly. And by the way, can I say right from the start, I've just heard, like us all, two absolutely inspiring presentations about the potential of the green industrial revolution. Well done to both. A minor point, by the way, I'm joint chair of the all-party manufacturing group, and come, of course, from an industrial trade union background. And I work very closely with the 6 major manufacturing organizations, seeking unashamedly to influence government's direction of travel. And I'll say more about that later. Can I thank from the start you, Beverly and Steve, for producing the book. Once again, it's a masterpiece, which makes out a very powerful argument about just why manufacturing may make a major contribution towards the problems of the global environment, but manufacturing will be key to solving the problems of the global environment. And that will be particularly so in the West Midlands. I'm a West Midlands MP, and I also chair the Labour MPs in the West Midlands. And we work, by the way, across party on this key issue of the role of manufacturing in the delivery of a green agenda. Now, crucially going forward, it's essential that government plays its role and gets it right, because if it's handled incorrectly without the proper support forthcoming from government, then jobs and production in the West Midlands could be lost. through the sometimes uncertain transition towards net zero. And of course, in the West Midlands, we've got twice the national average in terms of those employed in manufacturing, and it really matters. As our friend said just now, if you represent, as I do, a constituency which is one of the poorest in Britain, then manufacturing absolutely matters, particularly if what one wants to do is to seriously promote an agenda of levelling up. Now, we often say this, and with pride, as the West Midlands led the Industrial Revolution, powered by carbon, but now it must be at the forefront of the net zero revolution too. And to achieve that, our ambitions for COP26 and beyond, that means making the West Midlands the capital of green manufacturing of the future. Now, principally, but not exclusively, Beverly, for the West Midlands, that means supporting the transition in British automotive from internal combustion engine to EV and the green technologies of the future. And then from a political perspective, of course, what's absolutely key is the role of government. And I often draw the comparison between the response of government in this country on the one hand, which has had its strengths, and I'd be the first to acknowledge that, with, on the other hand, a more dynamic and effective approach on the part of the governments in Germany and France. So the role of government is absolutely key, working with the world of work and industry in particular. Now, to that end, I've been involved over the years in various initiatives. I was one of those who negotiated the establishment of the Automotive Council back in 2008, 2009, and it's been a very effective focus for it, dare I say it. I mean, it may not be popular with everyone in government, but the word industrial strategy, and right now is playing a really important part, bringing together industry and government around the issue of transition. Now, when one talks about the role of government, reference has already been made to other roles, other issues that are key. So, for example, energy prices. But if I can just highlight two in relation to automotive. First, and that's support for the gigafactories. It is deeply welcome, the commitment that Nissan has made, the 1 billion proposal for the factory in the Northeast. But, by the way, it is also deeply welcome, and it was an initiative that couldn't have happened without government, the establishment of the Battery Industrialization Center, where we were only 2 weeks ago. Absolutely mind-blowing, and including in terms of its potential. Having said that, we need 7 gigafactories by 2040 in this country if we are to meet demand, and therefore, in this critical area of production, it is absolutely essential that government takes a more dynamic approach than has been the case thus far. And secondly, the role of government which must act to protect and preserve and nurture the automotive supply chain in the West Midlands, which is still very significant. Without diverting, I was part of the effort to save Rover from collapse in 2005. Tragically, Rover collapsed. But what we managed to do through the old Regional Development Agency in particular was to preserve the supply chain, much of the supply chain in the West Midlands. That was then key when Tata took over Jaguar Land Rover and had to make decisions about where they would invest for the future. And one of the things that said at the time by Ralph Speck, the very impressive chief executive, that in the West Midlands, we still have a supply chain, he said, one of the 2 strongest in Europe. So in the making, therefore, of strategic decisions on investment to maintain a strong supply chain is absolutely key. And it's key for one other reason, resilience. And again, without diverting, the problems that there's been in the automotive industry as a consequence of the crisis in Malaysia over the production of chips is legend. And therefore, crucially, we need a much greater focus on the part of government in ensuring that we have a supply chain, a healthy, continuing supply chain in Britain, manufacturing here in Britain, employing workers here in Britain as part of that green industrial revolution. Exactly what I said to Boris Johnson on the floor of the House of Commons 2 days ago. And to that end, it is a tragedy that Melrose are proceeding with the closure of the GKN factory in my constituency. 519 highly paid jobs, another 1,000 in the supply chain. A company that's produced there for 70 years, to a company which is 252 years old and made the cannonballs for the Battle of Waterloo. And that we should see 3 years after the takeover, the closure of the GKN plant is absolutely shameful. But I say that for one other reason, Beverly, and that is what's crucial is that we have on the part of government and industry a strategic long-term approach, and not the kind of approach you get from Melrose, which is buy, break up, and sell off. So the next stage is therefore, whether it's on the one hand the gigafactories or on the other hand the supply chain, crucially it is the role of government. What we cannot afford is any kind of laissez-faire approach on the part of either industry or of government. So if I can just say this in conclusion, it would be, stressed again, once again, wrong to say that there's not been some welcome measures taken by government. But having said that, we need an imagination of and an action on a scale by government absolutely key. Like, for example, in one other area, the heat pump revolution, or the heat pump revolution, another time, another discussion, is eminently achievable, eminently possible to create jobs on a grand scale in this country, benefiting manufacturing in this country, but only if there's a will to and a way. So I close where I started. Well done, Beverly. Well done, Steve. Absolutely first-class work, making out the argument for green manufacturing for the future.
Thank you so much for that, Jack. Apologies about my error in your joint chairmanship of the all-party group on manufacturing. Fantastic to see Florian here today from Policy Connect, and hoping everybody, and including Florian, will be inputting questions into chat. As we head into now our last but not least speaker, my colleague, Dr. Stephen McCabe, long-time academic and absolutely key, vital to pulling together and the editing process of our book. So Steve, looking forward to your words in conclusion and hopefully in summary. And then, of course, I'll come to all the questions and any other contributors present. Thanks, Steve.
No problem. Okay. One of the things I think that it's useful to start off with is a definition. So very quickly, I developed this definition on the basis of everything I've read. And I have to say, just as almost a sales pitch, but it's not intentionally so, is that the amount of material that's available on green manufacturing is actually quite sparse. When I sort of looked at sort of what was available, it was poor insofar as it didn't actually tell me an awful lot about what green manufacturing consists of. Of course, that's why we were very explicit about the fact that we wanted this book to sort of be to allow voices to people who actually did it. But anyway, without further ado, this is the definition which we sort of involved: the use of technology and redesign of processes used in manufacturing process procedures to optimally reduce outputs while reducing environmental pollution, whilst especially greenhouse gas emission, combined with an intense focus on resource conservation and sustainable development. Quite a mouthful, I have to sort of accept. And of course, what we're doing is talking in the context of COP26. This is the sort of 26th annual sort of meeting of this body. And of course, anybody who knows about the sort of work of the IPC will of course know that it's been sort of there for a number of years. And of course, it's only in sort of Paris in 2015 when we got the sort of commitments to reducing it. Now, just to emphasize, what was interesting when I sort of looked around was, of course, you sort of read an awful lot about the sort of the actual technical aspects of manufacturing. But what I was really interested in is what are people up to? What's most particularly significant, I think, is the sort of the energy. That's the sort of the big one. When you sort of look at the sort of the figures that sort of come out of greenhouse emissions, it's energy. And actually, what was surprising is that sort of industry actually only contributes. This is on a worldwide basis, I do accept. Just over 5% on sort of the information that we had available. So quite clearly, one of the sort of big things to do is that sort of manufacturing do need to sort of like everyone else, reduce energy consumption. And as somebody who's energy provider and some of my sort of fixed deal has just come to an end, it's a bit of a shock. So of course, we'll be sort of looking to sort of do what we can to reduce it. But quite clearly, going forward, we have a sort of where it's incumbent upon us, if we're going to avoid the catastrophe that is climate change in 40, 50 years time. And if anybody has not sort of done so, have a look at the Financial Times article earlier on this week, which talked about the fact that if we, for every sort of degree increase in temperature, 1 billion people live outside what's known as the sort of the niche zone, which of course means life becomes uninhabitable. And that's the sort of the real impact of some of what we're doing today will actually sort of improve the sort of the prospects of people, future generations. Okay. What I did do, what we did is we sort of looked at sort of what green manufacturing could do, and just to sort of to draw some of the strands together. And this actually sort of came from Jean-Pascal Tricard, who's the chair and chief executive of Schneider Electric. He talked about a number of things, which of course all aligns with the sort of fact of sort of using greener approaches to sort of producing what we need. But I was also particularly interested in the fact that he did sort of make the connection to sort of what was in the sort of the previous book we did on the sort of the green economy, the concept of circularity. And of course, that was picked up by sort of Jules earlier on in his presentation about sort of reusing, because one of the things that we sort of do rely upon is the sort of the fact that we throw away. We've got a sort of vast problem in terms of the amount of pollution that's created by needless of the components. Indeed, there was something just to sort of to alert you. There was a great article in the Guardian over the weekend that there's more gold in the sort of the waste dumps than there is actually in the ground. So of course, we've got to be much clever about the way that we reuse materials. And just finally, one of the things that, and it's actually come up in my own sort of PhD research way back in the 1990s in terms of sort of the excellence movement, there's a whole sort of host of things that can be done to address customer expectations, and indeed to sort of give customers things that they don't even require. So of course, that's part of the quality movement, but also more particularly lean manufacturing or lean production. Yeah, that's about sort of explicitly about waste reduction, which of course the Japanese sort of did par excellence in terms of sort of the Toyota approach. And I think we sort of need to go back and not so much revisit, but just to re-emphasize the importance of sort of reducing sort of waste and sort of the amount of energy we use in every sort of process that's required for manufacturing. Okay, I'll leave it at that because I know time's short. We've got 15 minutes to sort of to get to the questions.
Thanks so much, Steve, for that. That's really good of you. And I just wanted to actually remind people that the book includes not only some really good case studies, you've heard a couple of samples, but also some very good hints and tips for manufacturers at the end of it as to how you can approach tackling this subject area. Now, there's a couple of people on the line, and it is as has been highlighted there, available from Amazon and the Bite Back, the Bite Size Books website as well. But I did just want to come to Chris Greenough, because Jack was highlighting the importance of the West Midlands, of our automotive, transport sectors and supply chains. And Chris, your chapter in the book covers this, as that your lifetime's been spent in this sector. Could you make just a very quick point, perhaps some of the key points from your chapter very briefly, if that's all right, Chris?
Yeah, I think it was more about how manufacturers can get involved, but also how road travel and mass travel is going to change in the future. So I think we're all now focused on electric vehicles, but I think there's a real nod to autonomous vehicles going forward. And as a manufacturer in the Midlands, we're thinking of the long game. What we'd really like to see, and what we're really missing from the government, is that all-party long-term industrial strategy. And I mean, I was devastated feeding into the industrial strategy in 2017, personally as a business with our local LEP and council, and then for that to be scrapped and nothing really to replace it. SMEs are willing to invest. As SDE, we're willing to invest, but some of our investments will take 5, 10, 15 years to pay back for big investment in capital equipment. What we need to know is that we're investing in the right thing at the right time, and that policy isn't going to change and suddenly that investment is wasted.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. That's really helpful. And I'd like to come to Stephen Barr. Steve, are you on the line? I'm sorry, I can't see you on the screen at the moment. But obviously the importance of Industry 4.0 and the whole digital input is vital in the green industrial revolution. And you've written about that in the book. So would you like to make a couple of points? Thanks.
Yes, hi, Beverly. I'm just coming off mute in a slightly confined space. But yes, certainly our experience working with 60, 70 or SME manufacturers in particular is just how important digital and data technologies are really across the whole gamut of operations of the business. starting with ERP certainly, and then building on that. But we're seeing already tremendous benefits, real actual return on investment in the short term as well as the longer term Chris was talking about from those digital technologies. But they do need, lots of companies do need help really to understand the business case for those investments. So that's something that government programs are helping with. But I think, as Chris has pointed out, those government programs really need to be more joined up and more comprehensive in what they're offering. So we all have high hopes there, I think, for Made Smarter rolling out next year, amongst other programs.
Thanks so much for that, Steve. Great to see you and Ravi Gidamul here today. So thank you to you both. Also, I'd like to come, if Richard Hagan is still on the line, from Crystal Doors. Richard is another very exciting business that we were able to illustrate through a case study in the book. Crystal Doors have done absolutely amazing things in a relatively short period of time as an SME. So, Richard, could you tell us a little bit briefly about what have been the key learnings for your business?
The key learning was in 2015 when we got our planning permission rejected, is there's very little data, very little information for what we needed to do. What's so excited this year at COP26, and certainly for Crystal Doors during this year, is the number of websites, the number of people, the whole mood's changed. We have reached one tipping point, which is the change of society. Consumers are now demanding more. And absolutely applaud the idea of having a label to be able to say, we are green, we are made in England, we are made in the United Kingdom. And the other side of it is the government has started to realise at long last they've got the mechanisms together with the banks to be able to produce this funding. These companies need to be resilient, and it is about sustainability of companies going forwards, but going forwards with that certainty, which is what businesses want, what governments want. And there's a certainty that we need to reach net zero before 2030 to at least half what they've done. Crystal Doors, just before COP, purposely has got to net zero according to obviously the plans of Scope 1, 2, 3, all 15 sections. With only £15,000 at £25 a tonne, we've set our carbon offsetting at. It's a game changer. Everything has changed. We've now got a positive. It's now for the manufacturers to get together, and that's why Make UK are absolutely brilliant. And be able to put an argument to the government to say UK needs to show, onshore and bring it back to the United Kingdom, all the manufacturing. It needs to be local. For me, it's about people, it's about place, and it's about planet.
Thanks so much for that. People, place, planet. Well, I'd like to put people, place, planet to Professor David Seal, who is another expert commissioner on the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Manufacturing, who I've been delighted to meet through that forum, and also is a professor at the University of Surrey. People, place, planet. David, your thoughts, please.
Thanks, Beverly. That's an interesting one. I think it's been very interesting about, I think one of the things that I wrote about in my chapter in the book was bringing all this together in some sort of holistic fashion. I suppose you could call that people, place, and planet. But I think a lot of manufacturing companies look at initiatives such as lean manufacturing, Industry 4.0, and their own continuous improvement programs. And if they bring the aspects of this together with a green manufacturing view upon it, it becomes part of their existing way of working, rather than just some additional add-on, which becomes another thing to look at board meetings. This whole process of greening manufacturing should be within the existing processes that you use. I think Julian's point early on about material selection, just at the beginning of the design process, which will then influence all of the manufacturing processes regarding that product within the company, just putting a green aspect on that and taking away the wants to have of a carbon fiber component and replacing it with a more sustainable aluminium component just makes a lot of common sense. I think also the previous speaker spoke about localized manufacturing. That also enables, with shortened supply chains and local manufacturers, to enable us to reuse materials, reuse resources, reuse modular components in such a way that's not really feasible when you're shipping stuff over from the Far East. So bringing things back together in a more controlled way within our own processes that are part of our normal way of working really can make it happen.
Thank you for that, David. Very helpful. And actually, that I think nicely leads on to a question in chat from Nick Peters. And can I also urge people now to put in some more questions from chat? Otherwise, we'll be finishing ahead of schedule, which will be an absolutely unheard of occurrence. So, Nick, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, and well done on the publication of this book. I'm very intrigued to hear all the views. We've actually obviously been covering this issue during COP26 week. And I do think that there's a danger that we might just believe that adapting to our current situation is all it will take to get us where we are. I think there's possibly going to have to be a sea change in culture and as well as in consumerism. And I'd like to address this question to Christopher Nieper, because it's quite clear that there is a new culture emerging, particularly among young people who understand the waste issues involved in bringing cheap clothing, the £5 T-shirt, the legendary £5 T-shirt over from the Far East. And people are now beginning to buy decent quality clothes and then sell them into a secondary market. They're even beginning to do the same thing, renting clothes. Read of one woman who made £8,000 last year buying nice clothes and then renting them out for the weekend. This is an extraordinary development, and it indicates that there is a huge potential for high-value manufacturing, textile manufacturing in this country, and educating consumers to the fact that they can buy higher-priced goods and yet amortize the cost of those higher-priced goods, clothing in this instance, through that secondary market. And of course, that leads to wider choice and so on. Krista, have you had any indication of this going on among your customers, your clientele?
Nick, that's a very good question. I was challenged on BBC Radio yesterday by an interviewer who said, look, a dress from our company costs £100 and you could buy one in Primark for £10. And of course, what you buy in Primark, you then, the interviewer actually had somebody on their program who admitted to buying something on Primark, wearing it to take a photograph of herself, to put it on Instagram, to then throw away or send back. She then pointed out that we scrap and put 300,000 tons of clothes into landfill every year, which is an embarrassing number, really. However, if you buy quality, you're talking about buy quality, buy once and buy well, instead of buy cheap and throw away. So if you buy something and wear it 10 times, the cost can be divided by 10. And actually, it's cheaper to buy once and buy well. So you're absolutely right. We need to educate consumers of this by illustrating just what the environmental impact is. But Nick, I thought you were going to ask a different question when you started by talking about young people, which is, how do we get people to work for us in the manufacturing world? We're very quick to complain that we can't get the skills these days. We can't find people. And young people want to work for responsible companies. So I think there's a double-edged win here for us, a double-edged sword that we could gain. If you produce something that's environmentally responsible, consumers will like you and new recruits will join you as well. So it's a double benefit, actually.
If I can just come back on that point, Christopher, I find it really interesting, and Chris Greeno and many others involved in manufacturing will well understand the constant beef manufacturers have about the talent shortage coming through the education system. But in a different sector from yours, Christopher, the electrification, the electrification of the UK economy. The government has, over the last 2 or 3 years, been working with the Faraday Institution and with the Warwick Manufacturing Group to create the Electrification Skills Framework and Forum. And it's not the first time that government is talking to manufacturing sectors about what skills they need, but it is the most comprehensive and far-reaching, and I think the forum element of it is quite important, initiative that I certainly have experienced. And I think there is a move now that greater collaboration between government and manufacturing is absolutely essential, between universities, between training providers, to make certain that the schools are turning out young people with the understanding even of what manufacturing can offer. Colleges and universities are going to be equipped to train them. And I might add, how do you train somebody on servicing or making a car battery? It is a very dangerous and very heavy bit of kit. You can't just have one stuck in your store cupboard in the local college. How are we going to train young people in some of these new technologies? But it does offer some hope. But a final point on localization, just again, I think the future of manufacturing is learning how to make fewer things for higher value. Fewer things for higher value. That's a tremendous step change to grasp, because for the last 30 years, we've been making more things cheaper or getting other people to do it. We've outsourced our manufacturing. Let's bring it home, higher quality, higher value, make fewer things. Very much a return to the 19th century in many respects, with, of course, some fantastic technologies that will enable us to achieve all those things and satisfy consumer demand.
Thanks so much, Nick, for that impassioned summation, I think, of so much of what's been said in the discussion today. And one of the things I'd like to ask and address to Brigitte, before perhaps we conclude our discussions today, but is that you talk about manufacturing being 13% of emissions, but there's a lot of discussion, and Richard talked about scope 1, 2, and 3, which Crystal Doors have addressed directly. Is the 13% scope 1, 2, and 3? Because I always feel that, as Professor Dieter Helms said recently, that you could offshore all your manufacturing and hit your net zero targets. But actually, if you're simply offshoring your emissions when really not doing anything to help the planet. So could you just let me know about that 13% and how we're tackling scope 1, 2, and 3, which 3 being the biggest amount of our emissions, which is...
I believe, yes, thank you. I believe that the 13% and all the carbon calculations or greenhouse gas calculations by the government at the moment only comprise the domestic greenhouse gas production and not the imported one. So, and I believe that the imported proportion is half or as much. So we're really not counting much. And indeed, so this is part of the scope 3, it would be part of the scope 3 emissions if you want for a company. And yes, in many cases, scope 3 emissions constitute up to 90% of the emissions. So it's absolutely crucial to get going on the scope 3 emissions as well. Net zero is all about, not offsetting in the first place. So you try to first reduce your emissions and then, as a last resort, offsetting them. But yeah, so it's critical to start work on that, and there is a lot of work. I think the pressure will come from the tier 1 and OEMs down the supply chain because of the reporting requirements, which are will become mandatory for large companies. So the supply chain are receiving questionnaires on what they're doing and so on. So, but there is a need there for help and support to the smaller players who also often don't have the resources or competence even to understand all the questions that are asked. So we'll be working as well on the pilots with some of our, our short example supply chains with bigger and smaller players to see how that works and how we can streamline and perhaps standardize the questionnaires. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I know that you're at Make UK having a big focus on support from next year. Is that correct in terms of the green manufacturing drive?
Well, yes, well, we've done a lot this year already, and we're just about to release our roadmap, first roadmap for the manufacturing sector. So that will be on the 15th of this month. But next year, we're going to focus more on the financial case, to really show everyone that, that there is a financial case and a commercial case for that, what the benefits are in, more better term, more practical terms, financial, and also what to do more in practice. So we've had some trainings, but we need to, delve deeper into the topics, and that's what we'll do next year.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. And Richard Hagan, just in the last few minutes, I noticed you put a note in about banks working together to offer carbon emissions from transactions. Would you mind just saying a couple of words about that? We do have a banker on the line. I think Manjit Kang is still with us. Richard.
It was Monday night, and Andrew Griffiths was there. This was with the Chamber. And the Lloyds have said they're able, through all the transactions that businesses do, to guesstimate or get very close to all the transactions actually relate to this amount. So they know what they purchased, where they purchased them from. And the banks are now starting to talk together. It could be likely that the banks could be the pivotal point to be able to actually say, we see you as a risk because you're not doing enough to do sustainability. And therefore, it's not just a credit rating on financials. It could be now a sustainable credit rating, which would be fantastic. And if the banks wanted then lend based on sustainability and the resistance, then that would be the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. But it also then put a lot of pressure on SMEs, as we've seen from the pension funds to the big companies down to the supply chain to the smaller companies. It's going to hit the smaller companies much faster. That they've been allowed to get away with too much for too long. Family-owned businesses are done for family-owned lifestyles, and we need to change that they start looking after their employees and realizing they've got much more responsibility. You're on mute, Beverly.
Oh, that is a very poor turnout, isn't it? But just having a look here at Florian's written a note to say the all-party manufacturing group will be exploring manufacturing skills from next year. Florian, would you like to say a couple of words about that before we close?
Yes, just to say congratulations to Ricky and Steve on the book. And glad to see that a lot of your recommendations chime with the Manufacturing Commission's latest report on manufacturing resilience. We recently released a short output, which Jack and both Mark contributed to on manufacturing skills this autumn, and we'll be exploring that in more depth from next year, especially trying to understand the labour market, the future labour market for manufacturing, and how we can best achieve our net zero and digitalisation goals.
Thank you. Just unmuting. Thank you very much indeed, Florian. Well, thank you very much to everybody, to all of our contributors and panelists, to our publisher, Bite Size Books. Just to say in conclusion that you can indeed buy this on Amazon. I'm sure Bite Size would wish me to say one last view of our slide, very reasonably priced at $12.99 for the paperback and $24.99 for the hardback. Now, I'm very sorry, a colleague of mine, Ken Pollock, has left the call because he was asking for color charts and pictures, and we have included them in this publication. It is a sister publication, a companion publication to our Exploring the Green Economy book, and both books should ideally be read together. Thank you. Really very sincere thanks to everybody who's contributed and joined the call today. I think it's been a very productive discussion. I think there's a lot more ground to cover. I really would like to congratulate the manufacturers who are making this happen in reality, because it's a big challenge, but there is certainly no shortage of enthusiasm, as is completely evident from our discussion today. Thank you all. Have a wonderful hopefully we'll have a very productive rest of COP and we'll get below 1.8 degrees centigrade emissions. But in the meantime, Good health to you all as we run up to Christmas, and a very productive 2022 to everybody. May it be green. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Take care.